Today we are in Akron, Ohio's Glendale Cemetery, one of the most picturesque cemeteries in the state. Here, statues of prominent citizens, an avenue of stately mausoleums, and a collection of headstones tell the story of Akron's past. This cemetery is featured prominently in several previous videos, but I realized that I never really introduced it to you. So, today's video is part one of a two-part series where we tour the grounds, visit the famous and interesting people who are buried here, and discover the history of Akron and much of the world in the process. So, if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. Pharmacist Jedediah Commons opened the first drugstore in the village of Akron in 1832, after he and his wife Sophia and teen sons Augustus and Alexander moved to Akron from New York. Dr. Commons was well versed in literature, the sciences, and politics, and was a fluent debater and respected writer. Tragedy struck 5 years later when Augustus Commons, described by his father as a son of much promise, just entering the threshold of manhood, contracted an illness that no medicine in the druggist's cabinet could cure. He died October 27, 1837, at the age of 20. Dr. Commons felt there was no suitable burial location for his son at the time, which led him to secure land to create the Akron Rural Cemetery in 1839, which he fashioned after visiting Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, Mount Auburn was recognized as the first garden cemetery in the United States. Mr. Commons is credited as founder of the beautiful Akron Rural Cemetery, which was the previous name of the cemetery we are standing in today. Akron finally had a suitable place for public burials, and Dr. Commons finally had a resting place for his son. He interred his son's remains and eventually built a family vault in 1860 on this tree-shaded Glendale hillside, mixing the mortar himself. His wife Sophia died in 1865, and Commons followed 2 years later at the age of 77. John R. Buchdall was born on January 18, 1820, in Stark County, Ohio. He spent his early years working on his parents' farm. He received limited schooling and purportedly could barely spell his name by the time he turned 21. In 1863, Buchdall became an employee of Ball, Altman and Company, a farm machinery manufacturing firm in Canton, Ohio. He convinced the company's owners to build a second plant in Akron. The new facility became known as the Buckeye Mower and Reaper Company. Buchdall served as Buckeye Mower's first president, and under his leadership, the company separated from Ball Altman, becoming an independent firm. He later became the general manager of the Akron Iron Company, and when it merged with several other firms to create the Columbus and Hocking Coal and Iron Company, he served as one of its vice presidents. He sponsored the construction of Buchdall College in 1872, which later became known as the University of Akron. Buchdall commonly paid the tuition of needy students or provided them with free room and board. He also donated funds to the Akron Library Association and served on the board of trustees of both Buchdall College and the Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical College. In 1887, a stroke left him unable to work, and he died on May 23, 1892. Mary Gladwin, a nurse in 3 wars, once remarked, "I have seen it all. If the fathers and mothers could have seen what I have seen on the bloody battlefields, there never would be another war." Mary was born in Staffordshire, England, the oldest of 7 children. In 1868, the family came to America and settled in Akron, Ohio. Mary studied education at Buchdall College, then became a high school science teacher in Norwalk, Ohio. Mary didn't enjoy teaching and thought that nursing was the answer. 9 months into her studies at Boston City Hospital, the Spanish-American War began in 1898. The American Red Cross was recruiting volunteers. Mary would soon be nursing typhoid soldiers as chief nurse in Georgia. She went to Cuba, Puerto Rico, and then to the Philippines to help with the wounded soldiers. In Manila, she oversaw the Red Cross supplies, and for her service, she was awarded the Spanish-American War Medal. Mary came back to Boston to finish her nursing degree in 1904, but the Russo-Japanese War erupted, and the Red Cross sent her to Hiroshima, where she assisted Japanese nurses. She was awarded the Imperial Order of the Crown, presented to her personally by Japanese Emperor Meiji. Returning to Akron, Mary served as Red Cross nurse at B.F. Goodrich and helped victims of the 1913 Ohio flood. During World War I, Mary went to Serbia to organize relief efforts and attended to thousands of wounded soldiers at the hospital in Belgrade. Twice, the hospital was captured by Austrians and then recaptured by the Serbs. For over a year, the city was shelled. For her service, Mary was awarded with the Serbian Cross of Charity, a medal presented by Prince Alexander of Yugoslavia. Returning to Akron once again, Mary helped organize the Summit County chapter of the American Red Cross and the Visiting Nurses Association. In 1920, Mary was one of the first nurses to receive the International Red Cross Florence Nightingale Medal, the most prestigious award she would get. She kept all of her medals and awards in their cases in a drawer at her home, but she always wore the pin that she was most proud of, her small Red Cross pin. Mary received an honorary Doctor of Law degree from the University of Akron. She served as hospital administrator in New York and Minnesota, and then she went on a national lecture circuit and ended up writing 2 books. In 1939, Mary entered Akron City Hospital for some much-needed rest, but her heart had become weakened. Mary died in her sleep at the age of 77. Mary's funeral was held at St. Paul's Episcopal Church and was attended by hundreds of nurses, civic leaders, and Red Cross members. In 1979, Akron U dedicated Mary Gladwin Hall as its new College of Nursing. Her diary, photos, and writings are in the Akron U Archival Services Department, and her medals were donated to the Summit County Historical Society. About war, Mary said, "Nobody who has seen as much as I have could feel otherwise about it. I hope that there will not be any more. They get worse and worse as time goes on. A year after Mary's death, World War II began. Ferdinand Schumacher, known as the Oatmeal King, was a German immigrant and one of the founders of companies which merged to become the Quaker Oats Company. He first introduced his oatmeal to Akron in a small general store, then to the whole United States with his factory. In 1856, Schumacher purchased a mill along the Ohio Canal in Akron, where he installed machinery and enabled his workers to produce 20 barrels of ground oats per day. The demand for his product skyrocketed during the American Civil War, and the federal government purchased the oats to feed Union soldiers. In 1863, due to the demand for his oats, Schumacher moved his operation to Mill Street in Akron, where he established the Empire Barley Mill. In 1872, he built the new German mill on the next property. And then in 1883, Ferdinand built the Jumbo Mill, which was massive, standing 8 stories tall. He also bought a stone quarry in Peninsula, Ohio, so that he could produce millstones to his own precise specs. These millstones were shipped 6-7 miles to Akron via the Ohio Canal. He continued to experiment with new ways to process oats, developing a way to pre-cook the oats, turning them into flakes. Schumacher's flaked oats became an immediate bestseller. He sold his oats across the United States, from Boston, Massachusetts to San Francisco, California. In 1886, there was a disastrous fire that destroyed the factory. He acted right away and rebuilt. He merged with failing Akron Milling Company, and the new formation was named the F. Schumacher Milling Company, which in a few years joined others to form the American Cereal Company. Schumacher was named president at first, but after conflicts with others, he was dropped in 1899. American Cereal went on to form the Quaker Oats Company. Schumacher died in 1908 at the age of 86. Alvin Coe Voris was born in Stark County, Ohio in 1827 and moved with his family to Bath Township when he was a child. Voris attended Oberlin College and served as a deputy clerk and acting probate judge in Summit County until 1852. When the American Civil War began, Voris enlisted in the 29th Ohio Infantry Regiment as a sergeant in September 1861. He rose through the ranks, first promoted to second lieutenant, and then appointed to lieutenant colonel in the 67th Ohio Infantry Regiment on October 11th, 1861. In 1863, Voris was ordered to move his infantry to Hilton Head, South Carolina, making camp at Morris Island near Fort Sumter. There, during the attack on Fort Wagner, made famous by the movie Glory, Voris was wounded and subsequently nursed back to health by Clara Barton. Of the 300 members of the 67th that joined the attack that day, 150 became casualties. Voris then returned to Washington, D.C., and took part in the final campaigns of the war in Virginia. During those years, Voris rose to the rank of Brevet Brigadier General and finally to Brevet Major General, commanding a brigade and then a division. After the surrender at Appomattox, Voris was assigned command of a military sub-district in Virginia. Upon returning home, he resumed his law practice, and in 1873, he was elected Common Pleas Judge for Summit, Medina, and Lorain counties. Voris was active in Civil War veterans groups like the Grand Army of the Republic and the Military Order of the Loyal Legion of the United States. As an officer of those groups, he participated in many ceremonies. One of his first post-war acts was to give a speech at the dedication of the Civil War Monument in Oakwood Cemetery in Cuyahoga Falls on October 26, 1866. This is the grave of the great Raymond. His original name was Maurice Saunders, and he was born in Akron, Ohio. He had his name legally changed to Maurice Francois Raymond, and he toured the world as the Great Raymond. He began performing as a young man in the United States, but achieved success first in England. He played in the vaudeville circuits, and in 1910, he made a tour of Australia, spending considerable time in the Far East. He also visited Japan, China, Manila, and Hawaii. One act that Mr. Raymond was known for was Metempsychosis, the fastest trunk escape in the world, performed with his wife Lipska. Raymond was sponsored into the Society of American Magicians by Houdini in 1921. Maurice Francois, the Great Raymond Saunders, died at age 71 in Manhattan, New York. We can't visit Glendale without speaking about its most prominent feature, the Civil War Memorial Chapel. The chapel is one of the premier Civil War memorials in the state, and it was built by the Buckley Post of the Grand Army of the Republic to memorialize the contributions of all who served in the American Civil War from the greater Akron area. Groundbreaking took place on Memorial Day, May 29, 1875, and the official dedication ceremony was held 1 year and 1 day later, on Memorial Day, May 30th, 1876. The 1,800 square foot chapel is built on a cruciform plan with exterior walls constructed of broken ashlar stone. There are 6 columns of polished granite that support the entrance porch, and the roof is black slate with red slate highlights. Interior walls are made of Constitution stone from the banks of the Ohio River near Marietta. The floor is covered with Minton tile, imported from England, and the ceiling is polished butternut wood, laid in diagonal strips. The most striking features of the chapel are the memorial windows. The glass is European rolled cathedral glass, imported from Scotland. The 3 window panels that comprise the north-facing window honors the service of women in the war and was donated by the Ladies Cemetery Association. The 3 panels that comprise the south-facing window celebrates the U.S. Centennial in 1876, depicting George Washington, Commodore Perry, and Abraham Lincoln. The large chancel window at the west end of the building memorializes Colonel Lewis P. Buckley and the 29th Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment. The Memorial Chapel provides a beautiful setting for many types of events, including weddings. You can get more info by calling the cemetery office or by visiting glendaleakron.com. Thank you for joining us today for part 1 of our Glendale Cemetery tour. The links to our Patreon and our merch store are in the description below, as well as our social media accounts. And if you would, please like, subscribe, comment, click the notification bell, and share this video. I would certainly appreciate your support. And we'll see you next time as we explore more curious history, the history of Glendale Cemetery. Take care.